really want that, you have that conversation. Like, don't be afraid to push back and say, we're carving these things out. And again, when you're writing your contracts, think about it up front and ask those questions, so maybe you can carve it ahead of time and get way ahead of it. You can't overlook the value that they bring to you every day. And when you're struggling with something, you go to them and say, we got to figure this out. I know that I can't renegotiate my contract, but these facilities do not count, right?
Dan, there's a big shift in healthcare right now. It's always changing, but right now, a lot of what would be acute care type procedures are moving to non-acute facilities. How is it that companies can think through the implications of this for themselves, and how do you manage this going forward?
Yeah, I think from different areas we can look at it, right? We'll break it down into maybe the problem and then what's the opportunity. But yes, we're seeing a lot more procedures being done in the non-acute space. Surgery centers, doctors' offices. A lot of times they're affiliated with that hospital. They're not necessarily wholly owned. And sometimes they are. And let's just say if they're owned by the hospital, then usually it falls under the same acute umbrella, the same contract umbrella, because you get pricing parities, SKU parities, all those kind of things. But when they're affiliated or they're outside of the network of that hospital, now you've got a crossover of what price points are they buying it at, where is it going through, what channels distribution is it going to go at, and how do you navigate that with the customer of how much business moving out of the hospital and into a surgery center. And the reason where it can become upfront for a manufacturer can be a problem is what sales team's calling on it too. So in some organizations, the non-acute space stays within a certain sales group, and national accounts don't usually touch it that much. It's not in the focus. We always think hospital first. That's where the big bucks are, the big volumes are to pay for, the ROI that we need for investing in a team like that. But as we see these things migrate to the non-acute space, there is a lot of engagement that should be happening contractually to, one, protect, like I said, protect price. Two, you want leadership involved so that you get the right people at the distribution level should be involved, so you can get the better, the tracings are accurate for your sales team. And then how are you going to maximize that? Like, how are we going to target that market? Is our product the right focus for that market, or is it just these affiliates that we want? So we can kind of talk about some of the risks that we're up against. And then from a contract standpoint, how do we maximize that and grow it?
Yeah, so let's start with risks. You mentioned non-affiliated facilities. Is there a risk that they're getting their products through the affiliated hospital or the hospital association, or?
Yeah, so this is like that, I'll start with protecting the sales rep a little bit, right? So if you are calling on these non-acute facilities and you're probably working with maybe smaller local dealers, or if it's direct sales, you have a price point that's going into that non-hospital associated surgery center. There might be, you might have to lower the price. Right? They see the hospital price, the volume that the hospital's getting, and they're like, hey, I want that. Or I'm affiliated and I didn't realize that I should be on this tier with the GPO, so therefore I'm going to automatically take a price decrease, which hurts the total sales of the company if you're taking right down just because they found out contractually they could take advantage of something. Maybe they really don't earn it, but they feel it that way. So how do you have that conversation with the hospital? It's like, hey, what's the direction? How many of these facilities are you going to actually start moving out to, and who are they? Understand what that affiliation is. The GPO will give you the affiliate lists, for the hospital really should, or the IDN will tell you if it's owned or if it's affiliated. And then you can start making an understanding of how's this going to impact your sales team? What level of engagement do you want from your strategic accounts team? And I would really bring in whoever manages, the national contracts, as in like distribution. So everything's going through Cardinal for the hospital, but maybe for them it's going through McKesson or Shine. That's two different pathways. So does the price change for them? Because you have different rebates, right? Different fees that you're paying through the different distributors. What is the impact going to be? So you really have to understand as a company, what does this shift from the hospital to the non-acute going to mean for you? Not just from, hey, okay, we're just moving business out of the hospital to a surgery center, but does that affect commissions? Does that affect EBITDA? Because now all of a sudden you've got different fees that you're paying to a distributor, and you got to redo your rebate structure or something like that too. So that's a big upfront admin piece of really managing through how to handle that migration.
Okay. So are you saying that non-affiliated hospitals are somehow getting visibility to the pricing of a health system?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they feel that they have the right to that pricing for because of the affiliation?
Yeah, well, and the answer is yes. And I think what's maybe the learning lesson here is up front is when you're writing, negotiating contracts, read that language. Understand what your contract is going to do, and is it going to go to members? Is it going to go to members and affiliates? Or can you create something in there that says, hey, affiliates don't get access to the price. We'll give them a different tier, or we'll give them a price that's based upon a local contract. But you should ask those questions up front and push back on understanding where that's going to be. I think it's in the past it was never really a big deal because it was very rare that a surgery center or a physician's office was going to get some of these procedures. Now it's becoming the norm to get them out of the hospital, right? Because it's better reimbursements, it's faster turnaround time, there's less red tape at the hospital, and everybody knows that the hospital is so expensive to keep someone there. So get them out, get them, and make more money over here. But that's going to change the way you think about your contracts too. So I really would say understand that affiliate list. If that's the focus of the IDN and where they're going to move it and how fast, and then how are they going to handle pricing, and if it's not someone who's really tied into that contract or that GPO, you should push back and try to protect yourself there.
Yeah. And so is that the language that we should be looking out for? Affiliated hospitals?
Yes. Means
it's not wholly owned, or it's not an owned,
yeah,
let's say surgery center. It's just affiliated. Because we used non-affiliated before. So affiliated hospital means not owned by the hospital.
Yeah, they're owned, they're wholly owned, and then then there's affiliation, right? And if they're not affiliated, they're just outside, completely independent.
Yeah.
But if they're affiliated, a lot of times they lump that language in and say anyone's affiliated with us will also get the same price. And again, think about your sales team, think about your distribution channels. Do you want to offer that price to them, or do you want to keep them completely separate? And understand what their buying pattern is going to be. Are they going to migrate and start buying from the hospital? Is the supply chain, maybe they have their own internal network, right? Maybe they have their own warehouse and they're supplying them all. Maybe a little harder to disrupt that. But again, I'll go back to my example. If the hospital uses a Cardinal or an Owens, or Medline to supply, but they're using a local agreement with Shine or McKesson or something, that's two totally different business models. And you really need to be able to migrate, understand that, have those conversations at those levels, and then pick the one that you want to go for and push hard to try to keep it that way.
So do you feel like the hospital system or the GPO knows the dynamics of that new relationship? Who are you talking to figure out what they're thinking about?
Yeah, the answer is they're probably not thinking it from from a manufacturer standpoint. They're thinking about is how do they maximize volume, safety of the patient, recover costs within the hospital. But for me, it still works with your contract manager. When you're working with the category managers, contract managers, they're going to know. They're going to know what that migration is. Supply chain is definitely going to know what the setup's going to be and who's supplying. And they'll tell you, like, we're going to supply directly, or they're going to get they're still on their own. They still do their own buying and their own strategies. They're just going to use our contract. Okay, well, how do we not allow that to happen? It'd be an uncomfortable conversation, and you might end up saying, okay, here's how we're going to control it, or we're going to have to accept it. But at least internally, you can plan for it. Versus when tracings start coming in and you see your hospital sales going down, and then the rep is the non-acute rep is killing it. They're not really killing it, right? It was just a migration of sales over to another facility. So you got to be able to balance that out too.
Those are some of the risks. Are there any others before we move on to the opportunities?
I think it just comes down to, I think the big one is for me would be pricing. And then we kind of mentioned a little bit, but we really want to focus on that too. Is don't let someone dictate your best volume price. Own that your contract was built around volume, around commitments, around tier alignments. And just because that they are, getting business from the hospital doesn't mean that you have to give them the absolute best price on contract, right? If health system A is, the third largest health system in the country, they're probably getting your best tier. But if their affiliates are doing like one surgery a week and they all of a sudden they're trying to get your best price, do you really want that? You have that conversation. Like, don't be afraid to push back and say, we're carving these things out. And again, when you're writing your contracts, think about it up front and ask those questions, so maybe you can carve it ahead of time and get way ahead of it.
Just to reiterate one more time, who is it that you're having these difficult conversations with?
Your contracting manager at the IDN level, actually having that conversation with where that affiliate list is. And if you're talking about the whole upwards of contracting, you can have that with the contracting during negotiation, the contract manager, category manager at the GPO level, right? And if let's say you're in mid-cycle, you already have a contract and you're starting to see this migration happening and it's putting a strain on your business, go to your GPO contract manager. Use them as a resource. That's part of your relationship. It's also part of what you get out of paying the fees. You can't overlook the value that they bring to you every day. And when you're struggling with something, you go to them and say, we got to figure this out. I know that I can't renegotiate my contract, but these facilities do not count, right? These facilities are not meeting volumes. They're not really part of the hospital. I'm not okay with giving them the best price just because they're doing business with the hospital. Have that conversation, and they'll guide you through best practices, best conversation, and maybe if it's the right, you got a valid conversation and argument, they can carve it out, and they'll clarify it in the contract.
Even if it's mid-cycle.
Yeah. I can give you. I'll give you an example. And this is maybe a little bit far-fetched, but it is possible. When we had a contract, it was a national contract, but we had no language in there about Puerto Rico. And we started seeing this wave of orders coming in from Puerto Rico, and they were bypassing all of the international distributors, and what was happening was they were buying a product at a U.S. A stateside price, costing us substantially more to get export taxes and all that stuff, and it was killing us. So we basically came back and said, listen, we're not going to sell to Puerto Rico anymore. And they're like, we can't do that. It's not, So well, here's why. Right? We spelled it all out. We have a very distinct channel set up, and if they don't use this channel and they don't buy at these prices through these channels, we are cutting it out and we're not doing it anymore. Went through it, we got the contract rewritten, and it said, except for Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico will follow these things. But we had a conversation, we showed them the numbers of why, and why this was too general, right? And in every contract moving forward, we knew exactly how to carve out the Puerto Rico, and everybody was on the same page. Yeah. So a little bit different, but the point being is, come with an argument, come showing factual, come showing that this is really hurting you and why, and work with the GPO to help navigate what's the right outcome.
That's great. And be prepared when the new contract cycle comes up, or if you're coming for your first contract. Right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Great. Yeah. So we did mention some opportunities already. Are there any other opportunities that come from this situation?
Yeah, I think on the other side of the fence is, think about the non-acute market, right? It is growing. It does make up, I think it's something like 40% of like premier spend, right? Ask the GPOs to break down that class of trade and know where the market's at. Maybe your product doesn't fit anywhere, and that's fine. But if you do, PPE, if you do liners, if you do linens, if you do curtains, if you do nasal cannulas, like, they get bought everywhere. So understand what the focus is from the GPO to support that, we'll call now non-acute or continuum of care space. Those areas, they're realizing that there's definitely a market to increase GPO presence and compliance, and they're redefining categories to be more aligned like the acute space. But the programs that are out there, right? So you've got Provista from Vizient, you got Innovatics with Premier, and with Health Trust, you've got the Health Advantage, and all their surgery center groups and doctors' offices and things like that. So each GPO has a group that is dedicated to that non-acute and continuum care space. Work on how you contract there. Maybe you don't have the exact contract with them. Maybe you have to. But there is a space out there that you can start looking at the aggregate of smaller facilities and build up what the market is, and then you can understand how you want to price it or how you want to build a tier, or maybe in your national account you build a continuum of care tier that can be very successful too. So it's not your best price, but anybody that's in this realm has its own tier, and then you use them to market your contracts to get in front of the field reps that represent that, right? But it's a whole nother strategy over there. So really, I mean, that's a big one for sure from the GPO level.
Yeah. So these organizations within the GPOs that focus on that, let's say, non-acute area, they have their own strategies, their own goals, and you should be working with them kind of separately. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, definitely. So it's not your contract manager will tell you who, and as a whole of the category, ask them do they cover into that non-acute space? I'm going to probably mostly not, right? That team you're working with on the acute space is not going to be the same contracting team that's in the non-acute space. They have a kind of a line there. So it is a little bit different strategy of contracting. There you can have a different contract specifically in that non-acute space, or you can say, hey, we'll piggyback off of, and we'll just give you a tier, like an aggregation group. But I would definitely ask the questions because you want to get in front of the right people there. It would be a different strategy across the board.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I would just make it that one more layer, right? So you got the GPO thinking nationally, but don't forget your RPCs, right? Your aggregation groups and your RPCs have a very large membership, and they have the acute and a non-acute focus. So what are they doing to maybe help you get in front of those other facilities, and how are they dividing it out? Because maybe you don't want to do something with the GPO, and I think if we talked about, right, you can work with the RPC. It's a little bit more fluid. It's a little bit more customizable, and you can test some things out to make sure it's what you want to do, and then you can repeat that in a larger scale. But I would say if you're struggling a little bit with the GPO, not quite sure where to start, and you have a good relationship with a large IDN or a local GPO, that RPC, go to them and ask them how are they managing their non-acute space, and what can you do to be more forward with them and create a custom contract or a strategy there.
So the RPC, would they have the same insights that GPO would have, and with regard to this shift that's happening and how many procedures and how many things are being purchased?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, twofold. One, don't forget that they're part of the GPO, right? And when you're part of a GPO, you're getting the information and the data that they collect, right? So they share that with all their members. So you're getting the large scale information and the tools that the GPO offers. But then if you go down to the RPC, they're going to know what their specific members are doing. They're going to know the tendencies of their membership and where that divide is and what maybe programs they've developed to help. So Yankee Alliance doesn't have the same programs as Capstone, right? Tenet doesn't do the same thing as Trinity is. So you got to really dive into those groups, whether it's an IDN or a large aggregation, and say, what are you doing for this migration out to the non-acute space, and how are you handling it? What channels are you using? How are you handling pricing parity for national versus non? And what can I do to help bridge that gap, protecting ourselves at the same time?
Well, that's a lot of great insights to help people not only navigate this changing landscape, but also maybe get ahead of it. So, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.